Hey guys, good afternoon. Excited to be hanging out with Jacob today, talking a little bit about our sermon. We're going to push forward and try to do 10 questions in 3 minutes, get you up to speed on what we talked about last Sunday, and hopefully introduce you to this next Sunday. So here we go.
So Troy, what was covered this week?
Well, we covered John chapter 6, verses 16 through 21. It's part of our series entitled Discovering God. Going through the book of John, verse by verse.
Okay. What was the story?
So the story was about when the disciples left the feeding of the 5,000, went down to the Sea of Galilee, got in a boat, and the waves came up, and they spent the better part of 6 hours on the Sea of Galilee in an incredible storm.
Okay. So you touched on it a little bit, but how does this relate to our previous week's story?
Yeah, so Jesus was feeding the 5,000, so that was the context. He sends his disciples down, and then he lets the 5,000 go away. And he meets up with them. He was going to meet up with them in Capernaum and meet them there. However, the storm came up, and so Jesus ended up meeting them in the middle of the storm, walking on the water. He stilled the storm, took them to the land. It was an incredible story. I think it was a bit of a real-life test to what he had just taught them with the feeding of the 5,000.
Okay. And how does that whole situation relate to us?
Yeah, I mean, we go through storms. Certainly on a daily basis, there are trials and struggles that we go through. But there's also these bigger times of life that might take months and months. And we find ourselves in the middle of them. And when we're in that storm reveals something about us. Some of that stuff going on inside of us comes out. That came out in the life of the disciples, and I think there's a lot that we can relate to with them.
Okay, cool. So what was the big idea of all this?
Yeah, the big idea is that when the storms of life come, they should strengthen our faith. I think too often we quickly become skeptical or question God, but really storms are a value added for our Christian walk so that our faith can be strengthened.
Okay, so strengthening faith, how did the disciples react to all of this, and how is their faith strengthened?
Yeah, so I think looking at the context, they were skeptical. They were skeptical at first. They had a faulty perspective because of all of the stuff going on around them, and it changed their view of who Jesus was and what he could do.
Okay, so how did the storm contribute to how the disciples viewed the whole situation?
Yeah, so what the storm did is it created trials and struggle, and in revealing that skepticism, that faulty perspective, it also showed them that they needed Jesus to come along and to rescue them out of it, and their faith ultimately increased.
Okay, so then what did Jesus do to the storm or in the storm? What was his part of the story?
Yeah, I think the beauty of it is Jesus was there. He was with them. Even though they didn't expect it, they thought he was a ghost. They had quickly lost sight of the feeding of the 5,000. And Jesus, as creator of the universe, just showed up shoulder to shoulder with them and helped them through the storm. And I think that's where we need to go. I think too often we try to fix it. We try to find other solutions. Sometimes we need to pause and allow the presence of Jesus in our lives to help us through that storm.
Very cool. That was a great message this week and all that.
Yeah.
But what can we expect next week?
Yeah, so looking ahead, John takes this pause and tells about the storm. And then he goes back to recording Jesus' teaching. And it's in reference to the feeding of the 5,000. But what Jesus is going to communicate is that if you are going to be a follower of him, it is not going to be easy. And so he is preparing them for a life of struggle and difficulty, and really communicating that Christianity is not something for the faint of heart.
Sure.
So I'm looking forward to it. We're going to look at verses 22 and following, go through verse 34 next week, and just break down some of that teaching. Hopefully we'll be reminded of how serious our faith should be.
Very cool. I think that's all we have for today. Join us on Sunday for our live stream, and if you really feel like it, come on down and hang out with us at 1717 McGee, and join us next week for the same sort of thing.
I hope you do. 9 and 10:45.
See
All right.
ya.